There we go. Okay, recording has started. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about building an effective food safety and quality program. So on to the introductions then. This is me, Lori Stevens. I'm the Business Development Director at Traction, and I come to Traction from 20 years in the food industry. The most recent and toughest were 12 years at Darden Restaurants, where I started as a benchtop scientist and worked my way up to Director of Supply Side Total Quality. So I've been in the trenches, had this responsibility, and it's one of the reasons I'm so excited about sharing some of my learnings with you guys today, and also so excited about Traction and what it has to offer the compliance professional. And with me is Andrew Thorne. Andrew, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks very much, Lori. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew. I can't wait to have a chance to speak with each of you when the moment is ready. I come from a SaaS and cloud software background. I live and work in Denver, Colorado, and have spent the past 5 years working in SaaS cloud-based technologies. So it's very exciting to be a part of this approach, and I, again, can't wait to have more of a conversation with you all when it happens. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, good. So let's get right into it then. The term visibility is used a tremendous amount, but I just want to give us, again, a tactical, practical definition of what is visibility. So visibility is simply knowing the compliance level of your universe. And we're going to define what your universe is, but so that you can make corrections before a crisis occurs. So this is definitely being in a position to be able to prevent fires rather than be in a reactionary mode where you're putting them out. And so we want to get at that visibility to compliance so we can, before anything happens, put in the action required to correct things before they blow up. Pretty standard what we all as compliance professionals work toward. But so let's define your universe. So if we boil it down to the essence of the three big areas of the universe you have to keep track of, that's everything having to do with suppliers. So audits, documents, C of A's, all kinds of things that have to do with a supplier. And then your sites or sites of any kind. So for sites, it's a universal word that we use for distribution centers, manufacturing centers, restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores. Anything that's a physical location is a site, whether it's something under your control or something you support. Again, physical location. And products is pretty self-explanatory, but for products that means incoming products that you're purchasing as well as finished products that you're providing from your site, from your facility. And so in order to understand what our compliance level is, we have to know how each one of these big buckets of our universe match up against what our requirements are. So we can know in 3 seconds what needs our action, what needs corrections, and then where things are going really well and we can help to drive in continuous improvement. So once we take care of all the reds, we work on the yellows, we get everybody to green, then we start moving the needle forward, tightening specifications, tightening requirements, all of those kinds of things. And so that is what visibility is knowing which pieces in each one of your buckets of your universe fall into red, yellow, green. Okay, pretty straightforward. And so this slide then is to call out that most of the compliance professionals in the world are Armies of One. And so how then, Lori, do I deal with all of this information, all of these big buckets, if I'm just one person? And so that's really what we're talking about today. I think that about 80%, maybe even higher, maybe 90% of the QA and food safety and compliance people that I interact with are Armies of One or Armies of None. It could be a purchasing agent who's responsible for food safety and quality. It could be a chef. It could be an R&D person. It certainly depends on the size of the organization. But I see more Armies of One or two than I do certainly of big quality assurance departments like I came from, Darden at its height was 54 people. And I never see that ever anymore, even in the big guys. They're much, much leaner than that. So we will be focused on tools that an Army of One can use. So you'll see when we get into the phased-in implementation, very, very straightforward. Do this first, do that second. Again, all my recommendations, but 20 years of hard-fought knowledge. Okay, so we are going to definitely be focused on Armies of One. So the challenges that we all deal with as QA professionals, right? So what does your current universe look like? And we all know it's just massive amounts of information, documents, corrective actions, audits, and you can see the laundry list here of things, different standards, global standards, domestic standards, client standards, all of those kinds of things, not to mention to know if our supplier base is FSMA compliant, all the regulations that come in. And so if you're like most people in the world, you're dealing with this now with systems that don't connect to each other, using Excel, trying to get some sort of reporting mechanism. You have a global reach in most cases with the world the way it is these days, and you're still an Army of One. So I lived that, I know that pain, and so again we're going to talk about tactical, practical ways to tackle your universe. Okay, so here are the 4 steps, I think, how one would achieve visibility to compliance. And they're just 4 small bullets, but they do represent, I think, powerful ideas that we're going to dissect a lot of these today. So the first thing to do is to be thoughtful about the way you implement programs. So these programs need to be layered in a way that they're integrated, and they need to be layered in the correct order. And so I'm going to take, hopefully, some of the guesswork out for you and talk about 5 and a half phases of ways to implement these programs. And again, in the second point there is do this in a phased approach. None of our programs have unlimited amounts of money, so we want to take the financial resources we do have and use them wisely and smartly and strategically. So we're going to talk about that. Then number 3, I'm going to show you that there is so much data coming in that there's no way to do this and achieve real visibility using Excel and Outlook. So I am going to recommend that you use intelligent software. The 4th one then is once you have these going, you have this intelligent software, you're starting in a smart way, then using all the tools at your disposal to populate the data smartly. So that means connecting your intelligent software to other data feeds from other systems. So if you have an ERP system or you have a R&D system, a purchasing system, you're using SAP or Oracle, those kinds of things, let's connect the intelligent software that you have for your compliance work to those systems, have it feed in, and then you're pulling data from the source of the truth. You don't have to be the one that has to listen out when a new supplier is added. The systems will tell you. And then the other point here is have the owners of the compliance do 80% of the work. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but those closest to owning that information, and by this I mean suppliers, technicians on the shop floor, people in the QA lab, those are the people who own compliance, and they should be doing the data population in the various universes that we're talking about. All right, so what does visibility actually look like? And this is the part that I get really excited about, because this is the part that I would strive for 40 hours a week, 140 hours at end of quarter to come up with the reporting. So this is really, really the exciting part. So visibility looks like this when you take all of your data sources and you know what they look like for the different suppliers who are making these different ingredients. And our example here is ingredients, but you can also see a car and a tool. And so it doesn't matter that it's food, but it just illustrates the compliance and what we're going to show you what visibility looks like. So if we know what each one of these suppliers, so there's 3 suppliers for each product, and so we have six ingredients. And so what they look like, then we can tell what our products look like that we're buying, and then what the finished good is going to look like. So in this case, something is very wrong with our hamburger, right? So it's red, so we know that. So let's say that's a finished product for us. But we don't know until we get to the level here that we have visibility. We don't know which product may have been coming in incorrectly. But once we achieve visibility, we know exactly what it is, right? So we know the lettuce and the cheese are our problem, and we can look down a level deeper, and we know it's one supplier of lettuce and it's one supplier of cheese. And, oh, by the way, there's another supplier of cheese that needs some attention and a supplier of our hamburgers that need attention, but everything else is good. So that's the 80-20 rule in action. So I know as the owner of this compliance that I just need to do the 20% that requires my expertise, and the 80% is smooth and it's working the way it's supposed to. And we'll see a lot of that is because I'm using intelligent software that's going to automate this process for me, and that's a little preview to toward the end of the presentation. And so this is what visibility looks like. So we turn this knowledge of what each element in our supply chain is doing, how they're attaining compliance to our requirements. Oh, and then our cars and our tool is also having trouble. And then the absolute ultimate is then having these dashboards. So that shows us the risk of each one of the buckets of our universe. So this one is very specific towards suppliers. And so the great thing about this, I'm sure you all can see it just when I flashed up the slide, but I can tell immediately I'm an Army of One. I have a global supply chain. I know exactly where I need to send the limited human resources that I have or spend the financial resources that I have, right? So I have a real problem going on in Chile. So I need to get on an airplane, or better yet, send to Andrew, and we're going to go in there and work with our suppliers. I'm going to be able to drill down on this. And actually, if you look up here in product type, so the things that are red, why are they red? And no great surprise for us in the food industry. We got an issue with produce. So we've got some Chilean produce suppliers, probably, maybe even a deli item that's having trouble down here. But again, in this dashboard, I can look at any level that I want to, knowing 3 seconds, again, I know what's going on in the universe. And somewhere here, north of Spain, probably France area, there's also an opportunity. So I think that probably requires my direct attention. So I'll take this one. I'll send Andrew to Chile. And then in the next few weeks, we will have these reds taken care of. Certainly something else might pop up red, but I will have known exactly that the money that I spent, I can tell my leadership team that I've corrected these reds. And so then next, I'm going to go in and look at the yellows, right? So it looks like Spain is a challenge, India, and Mexico. And so maybe in Q2, those are the regions of the world I focus on. And again, in 3 seconds, I'm going to make sure everybody else is green. So this is the ultimate attainment of visibility, is having a dashboard. Again, in 3 seconds, you can do strategic planning. Just absolutely the most exciting part for me, having struggled to find this for the last 15 years probably. This is another really fun one. So this is a dashboard showing compliance of our products. And so this is specifically focused on product complaints. And so, again, you all can see before I even highlight it to you, what are the challenges, right? So I can tell immediately from this that my main product complaint is damaged. So I know, because I know this, that it's probably a distribution center issue. So this might mean, we got crazy guys on the forklifts, we're tossing things around, tossing things into the truck, out of the truck. So to me, that's a couple of conference calls with my distribution partners that say, hey guys, this is by far our biggest complaint. If you guys can be more careful, do some retraining, understand what it does to the end consumer, my restaurant, my grocery store, whatever, then that number is going to shrink, and that's going to bring all of my complaints down. So again, I can see that here which supplier has the most complaints. and its supplier, no name here, right, just has a number. But this one is by far, so they're a big volume, so they're a big square. Oh, except for their dark green. So that shows me, yep, nonconformance, yep. So, sorry, it was green, and I thought maybe that was good. But no, so it's the darkest, and the way this graphic is set up. So again, in 6 seconds, I know exactly what's going on with my product complaints and can plan a way to improve them. Okay, so again, to me, the most exciting part. All right, so now that we've achieved visibility, what's the benefit of that? What do we do now? And again, I think just going through those two dashboards, you can see that the action that we need to take is pretty obvious. If we've done this right, which we will when we talk about the next couple of slides, we know exactly what we need to do. We're going to be able to prevent those fires that we talked about before we have to fight them. And then we're going to use our resources smartly. Again, so we're going to go back to the 80-20 rule. And so let's say I'm an army of 2. So it's Andrew and I, which would be great. So I'm not just an army of 1, but I'm going to focus those human resources on the 20% that only I know, because I've been in the company. I know the culture. I know what's important. Andrew knows. So those are the things, the 20% that we need to do ourselves. But then 80%, I can get some people to help me with that, because those are the things that are something that are universal processes maybe. So I need to get all of my supplier third-party audits. It doesn't mean that I need to track those down, but it means that I need to spend my financial resources wisely. So that's bringing on some help, maybe some technical support, doing some training to make sure the owners of the compliance are putting in that 80% of the data. It could be a wide variety of things that I'm going to use to bring on those, because again, they're things that other people can help me with. They don't need my expertise. And then I'm definitely going to be focusing on the things that are high risk. So certainly in food, that's ready-to-eat items, that's produce by far, and brand impact items. And so these are things that are critical to a brand. So like pizza crust would be to Pizza Hut. Certainly when I was at Darden, it was Cheddar Bay biscuits for Red Lobster and breadsticks for Olive Garden. So heads would roll if those things aren't exactly right. So those are what I mean by brand impact elements. And then we'll talk about this later as well. I definitely encourage everyone not to reinvent the wheel. I see it so many times that so many QA and compliance departments think that their universe is unique, but I would encourage you to not have that kind of perspective, because someone else has done it before, and it's someone even a related industry. It doesn't even have to be in your industry. But get out there and network and talk to people and pay a couple hours of an expert to help you understand what's available out there. Because again, it takes so long to reinvent the wheel, and it's never as good as someone else's wheel. I've done it myself over and over and over again, and I see other people doing it. So definitely encourage you to have an approach where you're learning how other people are doing the things that you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so now let's get a couple levels more practical. Where and how does one start with trying to achieve visibility? So we're going to talk very, very basically about a phased approach, what to do first, what to do second, third, fourth. You can see them right here. And so the first thing we're going to do is look at our requirements. Then we're going to focus on suppliers. Then I advise you to focus on products. And then in this third step, you'll see products as twice. But in the third step, what we're going to really do is define our products. We're going to make sure our specifications are locked and loaded. And then in the fourth step, we're going to go on to our sites. Again, manufacturing locations, restaurants, convenience stores, those kinds of things. And fifth, then we're going to come back to products. So we're going to start to tighten the specification, improve our yields, all of those kinds of things. So a very straightforward 5-step approach that I'm recommending. So let's go into each one of these then and look at the phases here. So the first one is to define your requirements. So you will have requirements for each one of the elements of your universe. And that then is what you're going to use to tell you if, obviously, they're compliant to your requirements. But if you don't have requirements, you can't judge compliance. And so again, two things here. I would encourage you to keep it simple. These things can be one-pagers. Your expectation of your suppliers can be one-pagers. We're going to talk about some examples of what each one of these sets of requirements could be. But, a confession here, I've talked about my life at Darden, but we wrote a document that was 100 pages that was supplier requirements. And it was very detailed, but not very effective because it was difficult to follow. And I was certainly part of that team, and so I see now in hindsight that we weren't doing any favors to our supplier community. So I won't do that again. So definitely recommend simple, straightforward, easy to follow, place for questions, that kind of thing. And again, not to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of requirements out there on the web. People who are doing these same kinds of things, and get out there and find out who's doing what. Okay, so number one, define requirements, and obviously, I probably should put that on here, but definitely share them out. So share them with each element in your universe, with suppliers, sites, and the people making your products. Okay, so here's some examples then of what requirements, very, very straightforward requirements, might look for each one of the big buckets of your universe. So for suppliers, we're going to have things like contracts, and this is contracts of all types. So purchasing contracts, waste disposal contracts, anything you think that is important. Evidence of insurance, so if you need to hit a certain attainment of insurance levels, all those kinds of things. Audits of all kinds, certainly for the food world, that's a food safety audit. Letters of guarantee, copies of their HACCP plans, assessments, certifications, all those kinds of things. Products, the list is universal as well. Specifications, what the packaging looks like, what the labels look like. If they have any kind of claims, so if they're claiming gluten-free, are they really gluten-free, and can we verify that? Photos of the finished product, laboratory inspection testing, sensory, all those kinds of things. And then, certainly product complaints. We saw a dashboard of that already. So sites, very similar audits, permits, checklists, trainings, all of those kinds of things. And I think if this were a live meeting, we could on a whiteboard, all of us come up with a list of probably 15 things for each one of these buckets that are pertinent certainly to the food industry, something similar to other industries as well. Again, anything that takes compliance, has a compliance element. Okay, so switching gears now to suppliers. So this is what my recommendation is for the second phase of implementing an effective program. And so these do go in order from left to right. So the database. So first and foremost, we need to know who our suppliers are. And again, I talk to a lot of organizations that this is where they're starting because they don't know who their suppliers are. And so having some place to database all that information, addresses, locations, contacts, just critical first step. And then defining what the supply chain is. So which suppliers are serving which distribution center, and then which distribution center is pushing to your finished location, let's say. So that could be a restaurant, could be a customer, those kinds of things. The next thing we want to do once we know where everything's going is we want to assess our risk. And so what are these suppliers have in place that's mitigating risk or causing more risk? And so some of this could be the kind of product they're producing. Are they a produce supplier coming out of, I'll just take an example that doesn't make much produce, Argentina. Is that a heavier risk for us than some other location? But so a risk assessment based on the things that are important to your brand, based on food safety standards, those kinds of things. But then that then is going to inform what kind of compliance information you need from them. So are they making a ready-to-eat cheesecake? Do we need to make sure that they have ready-to-eat audits and are testing their product on a hold and release program? And so that then leads us into asking them for all of these documents so that we can ensure that they're meeting our requirements that we then defined in Phase 1. So once we know where they stand on these compliance documents, we may or may not, it depends on what works for your program, get into audits. So we may be either conducting our own audits, asking them to have a specific kind of audit, all those kinds of things. We may be looking for an animal welfare audit, those kinds of things. And then definitely corrective actions. So that goes for all of the phases here. So if we see a deviation and they don't match up with our compliance, and we will see that in the red, yellow, green, then we want to launch a corrective action. We want to fix that, and we want to take action again before we have a fire. And communication is also on all of these slides because we need to have a mechanism to communicate with the suppliers. And that goes for everyday kinds of communications, goes for risk assessment, and certainly in the unlikely event of a product withdrawal or recall, we want to have a tool that allows us to communicate effectively with suppliers. And we know who they all are, we know what the risk is, so you see how that is a great tool in case of an emergency once we have all of these other elements in place. Okay, so that's what we're going to do with suppliers to ensure that they're compliant. Oops, too fast. And so then Phase 3, we're going to look at products. Remember, we have 2 phases around products, so this one is definitely focused on defining what those products look like, so specifications. So very similar concept here. So we are going to gather all the information around what our products are, who's supplying them, and again, we already know who is in our database for suppliers, so we're going to connect that. That's the supply chain icon here. So who's supplying what to what locations. We're going to assess the risk of each of these products. Again, ready to eat. Does it have raw elements? Is it a claim product that says peanut-free, non-GMO, those kinds of things? Then we're going to actually write the specification. And it's kind of funny on this slide that icon is the same size as all the other ones. But if you've had any interactions with specifications, you know that should basically be as big as the screen because writing specifications is a challenge. Writing them correctly is a double challenge, but so important to running an efficient organization, making sure that your products are compliant, because then we'll see in Phase 5, we're going to test the products against these specifications. So if the specifications aren't right, you're going to start to get some upset suppliers and have some serious communications, as is the icon here. So again, this communications represents communicating about specifications, about the products in the unlikely event of a recall or withdrawal. So specifications definitely the third most important item to tackle in establishing an effective compliance program. And then getting on to Phase 4, this is very clearly put out a little bit further because for all of these sites we have professionals working there that are on our team mostly. So manufacturing facilities, restaurants, grocery stores. So there's a little bit more control. So that's why I've put these out as a Phase 4. But still very, very important because we know at the site location lots of things can and do go wrong. So we want to provide the compliance process for them as well. So again, a database, very, very similar. So it's very straightforward. Who are our sites? Where are they located? Are they in China? Are they in Timbuktu? Who are the contact people at each one of these? So in the event that we do have a situation, we can contact them. Where then do they fit into our supply chain? What products are they supplying? Where are they receiving products from? Those kinds of things. Then audits here. And so this would be food safety audits, GMP audits, all of those things that we want to make sure that the site is complying with the requirements that we communicated to them in Phase 1. And also here there's other sources of data. So this would be then where we could connect with like the pest control company, the chemical company. So have our sites stopped ordering hand washing soap? Because to me that's going to be a big alarm that says, something's going wrong there. I need to pick up the phone or I need to get there and visit. Certainly, all of us in the food service area know that pest is a real challenge. Food and water just brings them in. So what kind of pest control records are we getting? Are those things being closed out? So those other sources of data can be very important for us to see what the compliance of that site is, and making sure that they're not yellow, they're not cruising for a bruising. So then when we do see deviations, we need a mechanism to take corrective actions. In this one especially, I want to bring up the importance of closing corrective actions. So this is something that is difficult, absolutely, if you're an Army of One or Two, but this is where I might suggest that you spend some of those financial resources, because especially given all the stuff that's gone on, certainly in the news in the last few weeks about the large restaurant company that's having such challenges, is lots of different discussions, but I know that corrective action closure is something that will protect the brand and also move the needle forward on our continuous improvement journey. So do want to stress that when you see deviations, it's really important to make sure that those corrective actions are closed. If you don't have enough bandwidth on your team, consider taking that out to a technical services team to make sure those are closed. And then certainly a communication tool. Again, in the unlikely event of a product withdrawal, recall, critical, sending new requirements, checking for any risky items that might be at the site, those kinds of things. So again, step by step, left to right, how we would get our hands around site compliance. Okay, so we're cruising now. So now we're going to phase 5. So this is, again, where we come back and take a really close look at our products. So here what we want to do is we want to make sure that these products are compliant to the definition that we worked up in phase 3. So we want to make sure that we are evaluating the products. And in this, again, is so important that it's not a statistically significant sampling plan per se, but it is something that our suppliers will then know we're checking. And so whether that's you bring in product once a week and have an R&D person look at it with you, or a culinarian, or you do a formal product evaluation program with a third-party specialist, it can be any one of those gamuts as long as the suppliers know you're checking. Because then they'll say, well, I'm not going to send that product to Lori because I know she checks, but maybe Bob doesn't. Just a tactical, practical human nature. Obviously not every supplier, but they do exist out there. So then when we see deviations on the product evaluations, we can take corrective actions. So we want the suppliers to correct those. And then when we look at them again, we want to make sure that's closed, that it's not happening again. And then that's going to lead to tighter specifications for us. So we can start tightening the ranges, the weights, the thicknesses, the counts, so that we start to improve our yield, so that our manufacturing folks start to get product that's much more uniform. They don't have to tweak the formula on the floor. Our restaurants don't have to tweak the chicken tender meal because the chicken tenders are too big or too small. They're right in the sweet spot, and our specification is nice and tight. That's going to save us money all the way down the road. Suppliers will be watching, and certainly, and this specification tightening will be helping us with that. And so again, we can't tighten the spec until we have a spec, and we can't ensure that we have compliance until we have a spec. So again, that's why the specification was pushed up into phase 3. And so then taking this slide and the bottom flow here, so there's also something else around specifications and products. So that has to do with product claims. And so this really is sort of phase 5.5, I would think. So that once you get to the point where you have visibility on your products, you know that they're attaining the specification down the road, that's having lots of benefits for your organization, then you can start to tighten and say, well, this product says that it's gluten-free. And so I want to make sure that they are indeed gluten-free, because pretty soon, if not right now, my consumer is going to start to demand that I know that that product, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is gluten-free. Any of those health claims, antibiotic-free, non-GMO, those are the big ones that are hitting the media. And so it's my responsibility as the QA and compliance professional to know that my products can stand up to the claims that are being made against them. And so some of this, too, has to do with menu labeling, what the nutritionals are, but that's all of the things I'm going to focus on once I get the compliance of the product and the specification is written. And so that then covers the compliance of all of the major pieces of the universes that you're dealing with. So let's see, we have a slide that will bring all that together, so I'll wrap it up in the next couple of slides here. So then now we're going to look at using software, intelligent software that's going to help us manage this compliance. So just a couple of slides here to highlight how important moving beyond Excel and Outlook really is for achieving compliance. Okay, so we're back to our hamburger example, right? And so this is the kind of compliance that we need to have. So we established that. So we have that hamburger, lots of ingredients, and lots of suppliers. So I think the real question here is not how do we use intelligent software, but can we actually get to visibility without it? So we've put together sort of a math problem to look at the volume of data that really needs to be managed by the Army of One or Two to attain visibility. So with the hamburger example, right, so we said we had 6 ingredients, 3 suppliers from each. We have 2 locations per supplier, 2 DCs, and 100 restaurants. Okay, pretty standard universe, actually pretty small, right? We're going to have way more than 6 ingredients and 1 product that we sell. We're going to have French fries, milkshakes, you get it, right? So in this universe that we've defined, we have 18 suppliers. We have 36 supplier locations. We're going to be requiring things from each one of those locations. We have distribution centers and restaurants, right? So we have health inspections, guest complaints, training, documents of all kinds, checklists, all those kinds of things. And then we have all the things we're going to be doing around those ingredients. And so if we do the math, it comes up to a whopping number of data points that every QA manager and compliance manager is going to be dealing with. And so that's just in one menu item. And so extrapolate that to an actual regular, real restaurant that's serving lots and lots of things and lots of information coming in. And I know because I tried it, it can't be done in Excel in a way that's meaningful and useful. So I don't see that there's any other way to achieve true visibility without getting some smart software in there to help you. 7 million data points, that's kind of scary. And so here then is the wrap-up slide. So the things that we talked about. So again, starting from the bottom with phase 1, we have developed our requirements and we've communicated them out to the 3 big buckets in our universe. We're going to start on phase 1 and we're going to make sure that our suppliers are compliant. And then that builds directly onto the next line, which is that our products are defined. So this is what I mean by implementing and layering programs that are integrated with each other. So all of this information builds from one to the other. So once we've defined our products, then we can go about seeing the sites that are making those products or handling those products are compliant. And then we want to see that our products are compliant. This is back then when we're going to test the product to make sure it complies with the specification, communicate out the corrective actions to the supplier community. And then from there, we're going to use all the information that we see through visibility to drive continuous improvement. And so that the view of our visibility of our universe then is represented, of course, in the dashboard there. And then what we see there is going to close the loop. And we're going to go back to what our requirements are and say, oh, well, we see that in Chile, when we actually got into it, they didn't have the kind of training that they needed, or they didn't know what the requirements are, or they weren't connected to the right system, something like that. We're going to know what's the root cause of that area of the world not being compliant, and we're going to go back to our requirements and we're going to strengthen them. So we're going to say, okay, well, let's make sure that everyone has 20 hours of hand washing training. Of course, an exaggeration, but if that's what needs to be done to make sure that Chile and other countries don't go red, we fix that here in our requirements, and then we communicate out those changes. And the blue triangle here is represented that is most easily done in using an intelligent compliance software that's going to help us run all of this automatically. And so this is the summary then of what we've talked about to this point. And so we have a couple of slides here just to talk about what traction is. And let me do a real quick time check. We're doing really well. So it's 12:45. So we have a few slides here on traction, and then we will open it up for questions. Okay. So traction is a product. It's a software compliance tool. It is distinctly unique. It's intelligent, and we'd love the opportunity to share with you what we mean by intelligent, because we're not just using that word haphazardly. It's a software that's helping global companies have the ability to manage their supply chains. It is cloud-based, so you don't need anything on your computer. It has automatic reinforcement tools for these compliance requirements. So it sends proactive notifications when things become due and when things are not meeting your requirements. What it will do then, of course, is surface the risky suppliers, products, and sites, as we saw in that dashboard, so that then can have immediate reaction and action by you and your team to correct and protect what's important to the brand. So this is a little bit more about what traction is. It's integrated configurable modules, right? And so these icons should look pretty familiar because they're the ones certainly that I used in the presentation. But all of the things that we talked about are things that traction does. There certainly are some competitors, but no one that I know of in the world that has the breadth and depth to handle all of the things that we need to be doing as QA professionals. So that's why using traction, it's really easy to do this phased-in approach because everything is available on a modular basis. If that phased-in approach doesn't quite work for your organization, let's say you have a huge point of pain, you can certainly start there. Again, the phased-in approach was a best practice recommendation. And so all of the dashboards that we looked at today, too, those are straight out of traction. So it made it quite easy for me to put my recommendations together for us today. And so that's what we wanted to share, I think right on time, too. So we want to thank you for joining us today. It was nice to be able to share some of my insights in my world, hard fought as they were, and certainly had the help of Andrew with the traction pieces and his experience with software as a service. And so, Andrew, any closing comments for us?
No, Larry, I thought you did a great job of explaining at a high level the phased-in approach that we're hearing in the marketplace. And so thank you very much for putting that together. There were a few questions that I put in the chat window, and so it'd be great to get your perspective on those.
Okay, super. Oh, hang on just a second. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see. Oh, and I missed an early one. Any chance you can increase your volume? Sorry. So again, I guess I was on the quieter side. Sorry. That's a couple questions that came in. I was focused on the presentation. So I will try and speak up a little bit more for the question section. So let's see. There's some a question here about can we share what we're hearing in the food safety marketplace today? and what people are talking about in the industry and common themes. Yeah, that one, the news headlines jump out pretty strongly. In the news, in food service trade magazines, certainly on LinkedIn. Certainly the biggest thing that's driving discussion now is the large restaurant that's going through so many challenges. So the themes now that we're hearing are, how can we prevent ourselves from becoming another one of those situations? So people are really focused on compliance and on making sure they have visibility to what's going on in their universes, and that too, but that they deal with it. So there's some discussion that there was some knowledge, but maybe not the follow-up that was needed. So again, that reinforces the idea of needing an intelligent tool to help you deal with this stuff. The 20% that only you can do, and then the 80% that a software can help you with, or some other resources can help you. So that's definitely the most common trend, the thing that industry is talking about more than anything else out there. So we have another question here too. I guess going back to the lab results. So the question is, can the system connect lab results? And absolutely they can. So Traction has a laboratory information system built into it. So it has a LIMS system, so it collects individual data points and bumps those up against the product specification, and then has the corrective action tool to actually deal with them. Another one here too about connecting with other systems. How is that done? So the Traction has a series of APIs, and APIs can be built. So those are the data bridges from one system to another. And that's routine in the implementation. So that's the end of the questions. So unless I see a couple pop up here in the next few minutes, well, less than that, the next minute, then we will close out and give you back 9 minutes of your lives today. So yes, okay, so no questions popping up, so we'll go ahead and close. So thanks again for joining us. Any other questions, even if you'd just like to discuss the presented material of a phased-in approach, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Certainly happy to discuss Traction or arrange for a demo at a time that's convenient for you as well. So thanks very much for joining us today. Hope you all have a good afternoon. Bye.